tips that I'll be sharing to you in this period, because we will be discussing multimodal texts, and part of it is to discuss how we can improve um, like PowerPoint presentation in such a way that it would cater to the kind of audience, purpose, and occasion that we have. So for prelim, you submitted your PowerPoint presentation, and you are still submitting actually. Others have not submitted their PowerPoint presentation yet. But for midterm, you will deliver this topics that you have prepared using different applications. I know that you're using, maybe many of you know how to use Filmora or Power Director, Powtoon. So you can make use of these applications to prepare a short PowerPoint or short video presentation of the topic that you have selected, because we will be using the same topic. You will be using the same PowerPoint presentation. What you're going to do is just to improve it, to make it presentable at the same time, using the different principles in preparing presentations. So tonight, we are going to discuss the fourth topic in purposive communication, and that is the varieties of spoken language. I think this is very important because when we communicate, sometimes we are unaware of the kind of register that we are using. But have you noticed that we can easily switch our register depending on whom we are talking to, right? For example, you're talking to a child. Stop doing that. You can do that. But if you're talking to an adult, for example, you cannot say that. That kind of register, right? So, which means that register does matter in communication, because it can either make us gain colleagues or trust of your colleagues, or gain friends, or your register may also set you apart, or may even push you away from your friends. So, which is why knowing the right register is very important. And that's part of the varieties of spoken language that we are going to study for tonight. So there are two objectives in tonight's class. One is to discuss the varieties and registers of spoken and written language, and apply the varieties and registers of spoken and written language in the proper context. Okay, so I'd like you to read this one quietly or silently. I want you to read it, maybe using your eyes, and then we will reflect on this statement from C.S. Lewis. He said, "Don't use words too big for the subject. Don't say infinitely when you mean very. Otherwise, you'll have no word left when you want to talk about something really infinite." Okay, again, don't use words too big for the subject. Don't say infinitely or infinitely when you mean very. Otherwise, you'll have no word left when you want to talk about something really infinite. Okay, so can you react on this statement? What does this statement say? Please type responses in the chat box. Okay, so any reaction that you would like to share with the group, with the class tonight? Maybe a reflection on this statement or a reaction on this statement. For those of you who don't want to say orally, you can type it here in the chat box. According to Glyza, less is more. Okay, so less is more, which means that even if you are in pain, you would say, it's okay. You wouldn't say, ouch, it pains. So you don't say that. You say less means you try to make use of words which are less in meaning. So in English, we call that euphemistic words. Okay, so statements or understatements. Statements which are not, strong as what is happening. So according to Logi, be precise and clear. Okay, thank you for that. Someone's raising her hand. Let me just check who that was. I missed it. Can you raise again your hand? I think someone did raise the hand, but I missed it. But Logi here typed in the chat box, be precise and clear. According to John Philip, always, always be contented and patient. Okay, so contentment and patience is the key. Okay, what else? Anything else that you would like to share based on this statement? Don't use words too big for the subject. Don't say infinitely when you mean very. Otherwise, you'll have no word left when you want to talk about something really infinite. According to Annalie, it's one word is enough. Okay, from ICEL, apply KISS principle. Keep it short and simple. Okay, great. According to Nicole, always control the words you are saying. Your words must be essential. Okay, correct. And according to Shelame, be specific. Okay, that's right. So I think you have, more or less, you have captured the very meat of the statement when you said that you have to be precise, you have to be direct to the point, you have to be simple, you have to be understandable, which means that you don't need to use flowery words when you're talking to someone. Do not say that this food is scrumptious if you can just say that, oh, it's delicious, right? So the purpose of communication is not to impress someone, but to make the person understand the message. And when you're doing that, you always consider the kind of words that you will be using. That's why I like the idea that, that's right, Mary Grace, we have to be direct to the point whenever possible. Although there are times that it's best not to be so direct, because in some circumstances, being too direct to the point may also harm or hurt someone. So, which means to say that we have to be careful. We have to choose the words that we are going to say that would fit to the occasion, that would also make the person we're talking to understand it, or that we will be able to, convey the message. What is important is that the message is being conveyed. According to John Philip, we have to include the word respect. That's right. Respect is very important. So that's how it is. Never, never exaggerate. Do not also give an understatement, okay? Because that's not good too. Just to be truthful and being honest. But of course, use simple words. Words that can be understood easily. Words which are not hurtful. Words which are easily understood by everyone. So the choice of words is very important in communication. Now, let's talk about the varieties of spoken language. So in relation to varieties, how do we apply the concept that C.S. Lewis gave us? As mentioned in the statement, we should not say infinite when we're referring it to very, okay? So which means that use the right term. Use the right term. So in terms of varieties of spoken language, how do we relate that? When you talk about variety, it is a specific set of linguistic items or human speech patterns, presumably sounds, words, grammatical features, which we can connect with some external factor, apparently a geographical area or a social group. That's what we meant by a variety, okay? So as mentioned here, it's the linguistic items, human speech patterns. It could be sounds, it could be words, it could be grammatical features, which can connect with some external factor, apparently a geographical area of social group. Have you heard about, or maybe you've heard because you're also watching videos on YouTube, or maybe you're also watching American movies, right? English has different sounds in different countries, right? Unique sounds. If you listen to an American say something, it would be different when a Canadian say it, or that when a New Zealander say it, or when British say it, even Australians say it. So, and even Filipinos say it. So it means to say that we are using English. We understand that English is an international language and it's spoken by a lot of people. I think there are more second language users of English than there are first language users of English. That's a fact. And interestingly, in the Philippines, we are considered to be the third largest English-speaking countries in the world. You know, apart from those speaking in the, I mean, those in the first, in the countries where English is spoken as their first language. So the third English-speaking country in the world in terms of second language user of English. Just imagine that. So how does our variety, our English affects our way of communicating to others? So, you know, it's very interesting, right? It's so interesting to hear other people say the same word, the same meaning, but in a different way of producing the sound. Singapore English has also their own distinct way of saying something. Indian English, we also often hear that. Maybe they are more influenced by British. In the Philippines, we are influenced more by the Americans, right? That's why we are using American English, even in our pronunciation. We always say, thank you. But in British, we say thank you, right? Thank you. So you see, that kind of influence affects our way of saying something. So as mentioned here, it's a linguistic items or human speech patterns. So that's a definition of variety. Now let's move on to dialect. Can I ask someone to read it? Maybe just want to hear the word of Andrea Capuno. Can you read the things on the slide?
Good evening, sir.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrea.
Dialect refers to a variety of a language that can signal the speaker's regional or social background. Is a variety of language which differs grammatically, phonologically, and lexically from others varieties and which is associated with a popular class or status group.
Okay, thank you so much, okay, for reading. Thank you, Andrea. So again, a dialect is, it refers to a variety of language that can signal the speaker's regional or social background. It's a variety of language which differs grammatically, phonologically, and lexically from other varieties, and which is associated with a popular class or status group. Have you heard the way, for example, people in Manila or an NCR probably would communicate? They would when they speak Tagalog, it's not pure Tagalog actually. There's like an English inserted into the sentence that would make it unique, right? And that's a dialect actually. Communicating in the same language but with a touch of something different that makes it distinct from others. When I was in Japan, of course, Japan is more or less 100% of the country, of course, speaks Japanese, although many also speak other languages because they also learn foreign languages. But when you go to Osaka, they have their own dialect in Osaka. They speak Japanese, but with a dialect. So which means that the pronunciation is a little bit different from Tokyo or from any other parts of Japan. In the same manner here in the Philippines, for example, our Hiligaynon in Kabankalan is different from the Hiligaynon in Himamaylan or in Ilog. Have you noticed that? Those Hiligaynon speaking in Ilog, they have their own distinct, distinct way of saying something. So, and maybe even some words, they may have also, some words which are used in a different context. I cannot identify exactly what that is, but listening to how, diverse Negros Occidental is when it comes to speaking Hiligaynon. We have the Hiligaynon of Silay, which is so sweet, and Bacolod. If I know some of you here may have been from Bacolod or are maybe from Bacolod. We also have Hiligaynon in Iloilo, Hiligaynon in Cabancalan, Himamaylan, and also the other neighboring places. Cebuanos, we have Cebuano in Cebu, Cebuano in Mindanao, and some other parts of the Visayas. So you see, we use the same language, but there is difference. Could be in grammar, could be in phonology, or in the lexicon, uh, you know, of the language, which means that we call that a dialect. That's dialect. And it is usually associated with popular class or status group. As I mentioned, um, in Manila, for example, when they speak Tagalog, they would always like include or put some English words in their sentences, and that makes it really distinct. And you would say, "Oh, that's a Konyo language," because they're using it. So, and that makes them really distinct when they communicate. Now, let's move on to register. May I ask Danica to please read register? I hope you can see it. It's not so big, but I hope it's still readable. Okay, I think Danica. Okay, let's try Darlene May Alapa. Darlene? Not here. Jason? Jason Alpis?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead. Please read.
Register is an variety of language used for a particular purpose or on particular social settings. Variations of the language according to its use, while its dialect as a language variation based on the user's register and this concept is not limited to a choice of words, but also includes the choice of the use of text, structures, and texture, describes the various style of language available for writing or speaking.
Okay, thank you so much, Jason. So when you talk about register, it refers to the particular purpose or particular social setting. I mentioned earlier that when you are like when you are planning or when you have this intention of asking favor from your parents, probably you use this being malambing na kind of register, right? Have you done that? If you want to ask some favor from someone, the register that you are using is always like very nice. Have you experienced that? You're trying to be nice to the person, saying it very nicely because you want to ask a favor from that person. Or if you don't like the person, probably the register would change. So when you talk to your mom, the language or the register you're using is different from the register you are using when you're talking to your friends. When you're talking to your friends, you are carefree, right? So maybe you're always funny. But when you talk to your mom, it's different. When you talk to your dad, when you're talking to your dad, it would be a different thing. When you're talking to your professor, for example, it would be a different register, right? So which means that you use this register for a particular purpose and a particular social setting. When you do a presentation, for example, in front of your classmates or in front of your professor, you would be very like using the formal type, right? But when you are talking to your friends, narrating a funny story to them, you would be using a different register. It would be fun. It would be strange or unusual if you are telling a story to them in a very formal tone. So which means that a register here, as I mentioned in the definition, it has something to do with the text structures and also the texture of your um, the texture of the statement or of the way it is being delivered. Interestingly, when you are dealing with your with your boyfriend or girlfriend, the register would also change, right? So it can be romantic, for example. So this kind of variety, in the language is very important for us to be able to understand what kind of language will you use in what particular context, and to whom will you use this particular language. So that will define our understanding of how diverse communication is, and we can make use of that diversity to create, you know good relationship with other people. Now let's move on to style. And it says here, it relates to the typical ways in which one or more people do a particular thing. Our style can be formal or informal. So let's take a look at the types of, okay, let's talk about the types of register. Yeah, it's okay. Someone's gonna leave because of poor signal, so it's just fine. Okay, so we have five types of register. One is frozen, another is formal, third is consultative, fourth is casual, and fifth is intimate. When you talk about frozen register, it is used when you are making a pledge of allegiance, words to a song, a poetry, prayer, and loss. So that's frozen, okay? Frozen, devoid of emotions. Frozen. Although poetry can be read in a manner that's also this feeling, right? But generally, the register that we are using for the Pledge of Allegiance, words to a song, poetry, prayer, and loss, we say it in a frozen register. Have you noticed that? When you pray, okay, when you panunumpa sa watawat, ako ay Pilipino. So that's frozen, right? And what about formal? Language used in business meetings and conferences. I don't know if you have seen maybe on TV how the Senate hearing is being run. Same with the House of the Representatives. Maybe some of you may have visited the City Hall during their usual session. You would see there, I mean, you would observe the kind of register that they are using. And that register is called formal register. Okay? The same register is also observed when you are doing like attending UN, or yeah, the kind of register that they are using when they are conducting like a meeting or a conference at the UN or at the ASEAN um, gatherings. Consultative, on the other hand, is the language used between doctors and patients, lawyers and clients, because you are, of course, you are asking questions, you are making a query, right? So that kind of conversation is consultative, like the register that you're using. And then the fourth one is casual. Casual is a language used by friends and slang, talking with friends. So of course, you cannot use that when you are talking to your, probably with your mom. I mean, with your parents, you sometimes can do that, but normally you say this with your friends, right? Friends, like slang words. Although you can use this with your family members as well. And the last register here is the intimate register, a language shared between couples, twins, and very close friends. I know that in the family, you can use intimate register, right? What about the kind of register that we are doing now? We can shift actually from consultative to formal register because we are conducting lessons, right? And this kind of lesson is kind of formal. Uh, well, we don't make jokes here, although um, I wanted the session to be just as light as it can be, so that you would feel at ease and at the same time at home. So, but the thing is, as I mentioned here, formal for the business meetings, frozen for the pledge or oath, consultative between teacher, for example, and student, or lawyers to clients, doctors to patients, casual with between friends, among friends, and intimate among family members. And it can be also between couples, right? Now, let's also divide the, the 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 registers into different types. Like we have two types. One is the public voice. When you talk about the public voice, it is used in school, at work, at church with friends, or friends or strangers. So these are frozen, formal, and consultative. So we consider these as public voice. Okay, these are a public voice. This is the kind of voice that we want other people to hear, or to hear us say something. This is the kind of voice that we want, or we always use when we are talking to a multitude of people, right? To a group of people. But when you are at home or with your close friends, you can use your private voice. Private voice, on the other hand, is used when we are with our friends and family in a casual setting, and we use our casual and intimate voice. Okay, so have you experienced that? You're talking to your teacher, that's formal voice. But when you talk to your friends, automatically you become casual and intimate, and you are using the private voice. So again, we can further divide the registers into two voices: the public voice, the frozen, the formal, and the consultative, while the private voice includes casual and intimate. Note, the universal rule is that a person can go from one register to the next register without any conflicts. Okay? So that's the universal rule. And I think you have done that. It would be, it's not good for us to not being able to transfer or to switch from public to private voice, or from one register to another register, because as human beings, of course, we are gifted with the gift of rationality. We're able to reason out things. We are able to weigh things up. We are able to discern things, like to understand things. So that makes us different from other animals. That's why it's easy for us, or it's not a problem for us, to move or to switch from one register to the next. And that's very important. Now, question: how do we decide which language register is appropriate to use? Answer here: deciding which language register is appropriate depends on the audience, the topic, and the situation. Again, that's the rule of thumb. The question here is, how do we decide which language register is appropriate to use? Again, the answer is deciding which language register is appropriate depends on the audience, the topic, and the situation. Okay. Jason, can you please mute your mic? Okay. Now, of course, the audience is very important, right? As I mentioned earlier, when you're talking to your mom, you may be using your intimate register, right? When you're talking to your friend, it can also be, it's a casual register. Unless your friend is your best friend, then you can switch to intimate register. So audience is very important. Topic, okay? Even if you are talking to your mom, if you are discussing about your future, about which school you will be enrolling, it would be strange if you talk in a different tone, right? In a different register. So maybe there is still an appropriate register for that. It could be formal, because you are, you're being formal. You are serious about the topic. So even when you're talking with the family members, it can still be. The register would change. So the topic in itself can also be a predictor of the kind of register that is appropriate to use, and also the situation. Okay. So even if you are with the family members, if you are grieving over the loss of someone so dear to you, I think that would also affect the kind of register you will be using, right? So which means that we can switch from one register to another. However, in so doing, in doing so, we need also to consider different aspects or different elements, that is audience, or these are audience, topic, and situation. So that's how that's how important it is in communication, or this is how important these items are in communication. So which is why in purposive communication, we develop here people, students, who know how to use the language in the proper way. And of course, for you to do that, you need to learn the different types of registers. And these registers are used depending on the type of audience, the type of topic, and situation that we are in. So these are things that we need to consider. Now, let's move on to the varieties of written language. Okay, so in spoken language, we have 5, right? We have frozen, we have casual, we have formal, consultative, and we have intimate. And again, we have divided these registers into 2, the public and the private voices. For the public voice, we have frozen, consultative, and formal. However, for the private voice, we have the intimate and the casual. Okay. Now, what about for the written language? Okay. Let me ask Georgeline Stoker to please read the first 2 bullets. Can you please open your mic, Georgeline?
Writing language is more carefully organized, more self-explanatory. The word choice is more deliberate.
One more, please.
Okay. It is maintained on a form of monologue.
Monologue.
Monologue. The writing language is able to live forever with the idea it expressed. Okay na, sir?
Okay, thank you so much, Georgeline, for reading. Okay, that's all. Thank you. Okay, so written language is more carefully organized, more self-explanatory. The word choice is more deliberate. One student mentioned earlier that when we communicate, we have to be precise, we have to be simple, we have to be direct. Actually, in written language, that is one of the principles. When we communicate through letters, we need to be precise. Same with communicating through text messages, right? Because probably maybe because it's so hard to encode or to type a message using your phone, or even to encode it, right, on your laptop. Still, it takes time for you to do that. So there is no room for flowery words. You have to be precise, right? And it has to be self-explanatory. Why is it so? Because for one, when someone misunderstands your statement, you are not there to explain it. So therefore, you have to make your statement, your sentences self-explanatory, so that when that person reads it, when the person whom the letter is sent to will read it, he will be able to understand the statement, okay, right away, or maybe easily. That's why it has to be self-explanatory. That's very, very important. Again, the purpose of communication is to convey the message, not to flatter or to impress someone with your, with your plethora, or maybe with your, what do you call this, plethora of vocabulary, or Yeah, not to impress with the richness of your vocabulary. So that's number one. Second, it is maintained in a form of a monologue. The written language is able to live forever with the idea it expresses. Have you seen someone who does the monologue? Okay, so when you're doing a monologue, it's like you're talking to someone, right? Ikaw, are you looking at me? Why are you looking at me like that? So it's like talking to someone, but that someone is not responding to you. So when you're writing a letter, it should be like that too. When you're writing an email, it should be like that too. That even if you are not there, when someone is reading or when the receiver reads your letter, it seems that it's talking to someone. It's talking to that person. So that's the idea of writing a letter. It could be a memo, it could be a minutes or the minutes of the meeting, the memorandum. It can be like a simple incidents report or an email, to a business partner, to a colleague, to a teacher. So which means you have to be direct to the point. There's no room for flowery words. And also it must be self-explanatory. So the choice of words is very important. Okay, third and fourth bullet, may I ask Giselle to please read the third and the fourth bullets? Giselle, are you there?
Um,
Okay,
sir,
go ahead.
an essential property of a written variety of language is coherence and logical unity, backed up by purely linguistic means. The written language is constantly being enlivened by expression born in conversation, but most not give up what is has acquired in the course of centuries.
Okay, thank you so much, Giselle. So it says here that an essential property of a written variety of language is coherence and logical unity, backed up by purely linguistic means. When you talk about coherence, you're talking about the connection or the interconnectedness of the idea. So the idea should not, or the statements that you put in a paragraph should not contradict to each other. Instead, it should um, complement each other in such a way that by reading all the statements in a paragraph, you would be able to understand the totality or the entirety of the statement. And logical unity. When you talk about logical unity, coherent and logical unity, which means that every sentence in that paragraph should complement each other. Okay? So there must be something in there that is not out of context, because sometimes when we write, we put sentences that do not describe the paragraph itself. That is a big problem in writing, which is why it's very important to always choose the right words for you to be able to ensure that all things in that statement, all words and sentences in a paragraph should be complementing each other. Okay? And lastly, the written language is constantly being enlivened by expressions born in conversation, but most not give up what has acquired or what it has acquired in the course of centuries. So which means that expressions are very important, but make sure that these expressions are universal. Okay? I would like to say that never use a word that is probably not clear to someone. Maybe clear to you, but not clear to someone. In short, put expressions there that both of you can understand. Okay? It's very important, choice of words. As I mentioned earlier, choice of words is indeed one of the salient things or points that you need to remember when you are writing something. Because in written language, choice of words is it's very important. Now, what are the characteristics of a written language? One is the exact nature of appearance, the abundance of all kinds of connecting words. Okay? Exact nature of appearance, the abundance of all of connecting words. Why is it important that all connecting words are there. Okay? Why is it important? Because without all these connecting words, sentences may have or may mean differently. That is why you have to put all the necessary elements in your statements for the reader to be able to capture the message. The bookish say space wasters. So despite the fact, reach a decision. So yeah. So of course you have to also use this. And the use of complicated sentence units, long periods are more frequent than short utterances, as mentioned here. Okay, long periods are more frequent than short utterances. Okay. We also have varieties of spoken and written language. According to Lin in 2016, the following nature of language variation as prescribed by most linguists based on the ideas of Mahbub 2014. One, language varies when communicating with people within local and outside global R community. I think this is very common when you are communicating to foreigners, for example, or to someone not living in Negros Occidental. We use different language. Of course, definitely. Our country is diverse, and that diversity manifests the kind of languages we are using. Even if we are just in the Philippines, we have more than 100 languages, right? And also dialects. Language varies in speaking and writing, definitely. There are some words that we use in speaking that we do not use in writing. So that is why we cannot put in writing all words that we use in speaking. So that's why when we speak, it's different because the listener will be able to send feedback if they don't understand you. However, in writing, there's no one for you to, there's no one to ask. For example, if you don't understand the statement, what does the writer or the author, what does he mean when he say this, for example, or when he said this? So that's a big problem. That's why when we speak, our language is different when we are writing. And usually for writing, as I mentioned earlier, it should be concise, it should be precise, devoid of flowery words, because we want to just communicate the message directly. Language varies in everyday and specialized discourses. Of course, when you're discussing something in the academic setting, our language used in day-to-day conversation is different, right? We use a lot of slang words or, like different types of casual expressions when we are communicating in everyday life. For example, the use of wanna and gonna, for example. So in our class, it's not good to say, I want to go shopping, because that is casual, informal. Instead, if we are talking here in this platform, in the academic setting, we would always say, I want to go shopping. I'm going to a restaurant later, instead of saying I'm gonna go to a restaurant later, because as I mentioned, I have mentioned earlier, in day-to-day conversation, perhaps with colleagues or with friends, with classmates, we can use casual statements or casual sentences. But when we're talking with someone, for example, who is not in our circle, someone who is new to us, a stranger, a teacher, a doctor, or someone not in our circle of friends, then we have to use different type of language. Much more when we are, for example, in the academic setting, for example, when we talk about specialized discourses. So it would be different. Okay. Now, according to Mahbub 2014, he identifies 8 different domains in which language varies depending on the combinations of different values on the 3 dimensions: field, tenor, and mode, okay, of the context of communication. One is local, everyday, written. Okay, the local, everyday, written. Where do we experience this? For example, when you are sending messages, right? Local, everyday, written. when you are sending chat messages, okay, to your friends, for instance. Many of you here are so fond of using triple, quadruple punctuation marks. Like if you're asking question, is it okay, sir? Instead of putting one question mark, you put 5 or 10 question mark. Do you know that that's rude actually? Well, you can use that perhaps when you're talking to your friends or you're talking to someone you're close to. But when you're talking to your teacher in a kind of business situation, for instance, or in academic setting, the use of many exclamation points or question marks convey a different type of feeling or emotion. That is why you have to be careful with your punctuation marks, with your comma, with your question marks. Do not overuse it. Please be reminded of the statement by C.S. Lewis, right? When he said that, do not use infinite if you meant very. Okay, so if you're asking question, just use one question mark. If you are showing a kind of emotion like happy, probably if you're very happy and you're familiar to someone you're sending the message to, you can put a lot of exclamation points there. But the thing is, maybe there's a local everyday written. You can use it for local everyday written. We also have the local specialized written, right? So it's a specialized. It's a different thing. It's a specialized one. So which means that it's a little bit formal, right? Local specialized oral involves specialized discourses. Okay, we also have the oral specialized discourses. Okay, so these are the 3 dimensions that we have to consider when we are communicating in spoken and written languages. Okay, so before we finally end, I'd like you to type something in the chat box, your reflection on tonight's lesson. Okay, so let me just stop the recording here. Can anyone share his or her reflection on tonight's